Hey, welcome back to another episode of Let's Wing This. So I recently had a family member reach out to me and ask if I could make them a blanket ladder. So I said, sure. And then I said, what's a blanket ladder? So it's great for people that want to display quilts or other fancy blankets that they have in their house. I am not that person. So I did some research on the internet and I found some kind of dimensions and some designs, and I think I can make one fairly easily. So I'm making two of them actually. So let's wing this. I'll be making several cross cuts, so the first thing I need to do is swap the table saw for the miter saw. Fortunately, these tracks I added to my workbench make this somewhat convenient. The entire project consists of 1x3 select pine. I'm only planning to make them 6 feet tall, so 72-inch lengths are fine. I bought 7 boards, which will give me enough material for 4 rails and 12 17-inch ladder rungs. Here I'm sorting out the boards so I can keep the straightest of them for the rails. After cutting one 17-inch rung, I use it to make sure that all remaining rungs are cut to the same length by lining up the ends of the boards and sliding the cut piece up to the teeth on the saw blade. I then set the cut piece aside and make the next cut. I'll repeat this until I have all 12 rungs. Since this ladder will lean against the wall, I wanted to make sure the bottom of the rails were flat, and the part that touched the wall would be flat. After experimenting with a few different measurements in an online triangle calculator, I eventually settled on 12 degrees, as that would leave the bottom of the ladder about 15 inches from the wall. This next part was my first ever experience with the Japanese pole saw. It's quite remarkable how accurately you can make cuts with one of these. I used it to make a matching cut to the bottom so the rail will sit flat against the wall. Once I had the first one cut, I clamped it down to each of the others in turn and used it as a guide to get the same cut on all 4 rails. I should note that while this is called a Japanese pole saw, I'm pretty sure mine didn't originate in Japan. So I got to thinking here, these boards are kind of sharp on the edges, and I can take that down a little bit with some sandpaper, but I think I could do something nicer. So I got out the router table and put in a chamfer bit and taken down just the edges of each of the corners just here on a little test piece. I think this will work pretty well. I think it looks really nice. So I think I'm going to run all of these pieces that I've cut through the router and see what we get. As it turns out, what we got is a whole lot of sawdust and wood chips. I learned my lesson from the router table mess and hooked up the shop vac directly to my Kreg K4 pocket hole jig. I'll be using 2 pocket screws at each end of each ladder rung to attach them to the rails. If you haven't used a Kreg jig before, I highly recommend you check out the link in the description. Now for what is by far the worst of any project in my opinion, the sanding. I sanded each one of the pieces to 150 grit. That's plenty for a project like this. While I wasn't happy about spending time doing this, at least the sander seemed to have a happy face. And now some more math. I wanted to make sure that my ladder rungs were evenly spaced and had a good appearance. I eventually settled on having the bottom rung 10 inches from the floor and every rung 11 inches apart the rest of the way up. You can of course change this to whatever works best for you. Since 1x3 boards are actually only 3/4 of an inch by 2.5 inches, I chose to offset my ladder rungs from the face of the rails by 3/4 of an inch. This doesn't center the rung on the rail, but I think it gives a pretty good look. To do this easily, I just placed some 3/4 inch plywood under the rungs while attaching them to the rails. I should also note that it's a good idea to lower the torque setting on your drill when using Craig screws. They've got some pretty good bite, and on more than one occasion, I've had one pop through the face of my workpiece. So there you have it, 2 blanket ladders set and ready for delivery. I hope you enjoyed the journey. If you did, hit the like button down below. While you're down there, hit the subscribe button and the little bell notification if you want to see when my next video comes out. I took some time off for 2020 because, you know, we all had another thing happening. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. I don't know how regularly I'll be making videos, maybe twice a month, maybe just once a month, and maybe if you're lucky, 3 times a month. I just don't know. It depends on the complexity of the project and what all is going to go into it. So hit the bell and see when I post something new. See you next time.